My name is Brent Charleton, and I'm an executive coach and a licensed psychotherapist.
And how long have you been doing this for?
I started in the field in 2001. And as far as this current incarnation of doing work, I would say it's been about 12 years, hardcore about 8 years.
And how did what you do develop?
It was a process. It started out, my first job in the field of psychology was with homeless kids and homeless youth. And so that's kind of where it started, actually. So working in public health for many years and working with people that were really struggling, I learned a lot about what was going on with people. And also that there were things at the core of a person that were off, that were causing them to have problems. So then after that, I started kind of moving into private practice and doing work with what I call a higher functioning population. It's kind of how it's talked about. And I noticed that they had a lot of the same problems, just not at the same level as the lower functioning clients. So I felt pretty limited in my ability to help, because even though I was pretty good at treating depression and anxiety, something else would show up in the client. And so that was true with low functioning people as well as high functioning people. And so I started to realize that there was something missing from the interventions and the work that I learned in school, as well as just missing from kind of how the field of psychology works and how traditional therapy is set up. Because essentially people would get a little better about their depression or anxiety, and then something else would show up, something random that I hadn't anticipated. So like, for example, they may get better with depression and anxiety, but they'd have relational problems show up, or addiction issues, things at work would blow up, relational problems, essentially. So I really started to get serious about the fact that there is something missing at a core level that psychology, the general field, is missing. And so I started to seek out, people that were working on this thing called core issues. And so I actually got a job designing a program, a substance abuse program and an eating disorder program for a place in Mississippi, actually, of all places. And it's like a high-end treatment center. And so there they were working a lot with Pia Melody's work on core issues. And I had been brought in to redo some of the aspects of their program. In other words, rewrite a curriculum for clients, or in that model, patients to go through that were struggling with addiction. And I learned a lot about core issues and as it was framed by Pia Melody. So there were things I liked about it and things I agreed with, and there were things I did not like about it. And what was missing from these kind of core issue models, like the idea that there's something at the root of a person that's actually driving these other problems that they're having, what was missing was an application. So there was some interesting theory, and it had a huge impact on my thinking and really helped me to frame stuff, but there was no application afterward. In other words, it was like, okay, this is what's going on with you, very insight-oriented for the client or for the patient in that model. But there was no way to apply it afterward. And that was the exact same problem I was having with what is more traditional psychotherapeutic work. And I just thought it sucked that there was no application. People would get stirred up, they'd get a little bit better, but then everything would just be unresolved. So it wasn't enough for me. And so I started kind of building application that went with this structure that I learned, this core issue stuff. And I also devised what I thought the core issues were, how many there were, how they worked. So it was a combination of all the trainings that I had in public health, as well as jobs and different counseling things, working at a methadone clinic, and then designing programs. All of that started to kind of coalesce with what I thought about it and my own work. So my own work started to emerge. And I started writing it down and cataloging it. And basically I decided, okay, you have a new model, essentially. You have a new way to work with people. You're going to call it coaching, and that's before coaching was such a big thing. You're going to call it coaching, and you're going to have application, you're going to have this model, you're going to have intensives. And I decided a whole way to do it. And then I just had to get an office and do it. So I borrowed money from my mom, which I didn't really want to do, but I had no other option at this point. So I gave up the private practice stuff.
How old are you at this time?
I was like 33, right? Yeah, so that was like 10 years ago when I opened the first office. So I got an office and I had no clients. But I had an intensive and I had an idea of what was supposed to happen with people. So actually a referral from my mom again. And I was already, working and had a business in California, but I had decided, okay, I need to actually bite the bullet and do this private practice thing with just coaching. So a referral from her was my first client, and that woman had a dramatic change. And it was so dramatic I didn't really believe the results, because she had come to see me for relational problems with her husband. And what ended up happening when she went through the first intensive, the first version, which was like 5 days, and it was a much thicker book and process, it was too dense at that time, was she lost a bunch of weight, as well as was reporting that things were better, that she just wasn't as bothered by things at home, et cetera, et cetera. But her weight loss was so rapid that I thought she had become anorectic. So I literally thought that what I had built maybe messed her up more. And she was reporting that everything was fine, but she kept losing weight at dramatic rates. Like, it was visible. So, because I saw her every week. And so basically, finally I was like, look, I really think you have an eating disorder, and we got to talk about this, and blah, 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 blah. And she's like, no, you don't get it. I'm just not eating the way I used to eat. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, I don't want to eat as much, and I'm not snacking at night. Like, she's like, I don't know. But at this point, she thought I was like a god, because she had been overweight her whole life. And I'm like, this is not a weight loss program. Like, I didn't really understand what was happening. But it made sense in a way, because I was trying to get to the core of a person and make changes at the core. So therefore, symptoms, what people call conditions, or the actual things people get treatment for, I view those as symptoms. Those symptoms should start to fall away if what's driving them has been removed.
So what was driving her eating?
She was exacerbated within the core issues. So essentially, she had issues around worth, safety, perfection, and needs. And she was very much in the child areas around it. So she had a lot of less than going on. She was very exposed emotionally just in her life. And how she would medicate was food, which is kind of common knowledge, the medicating with food part. And actually, everything's a form of medicine to a human. It's just how much medicine are you taking? So she would medicate with food, and what happened is she didn't have the need to medicate what was going on with her along the core issues with food. And so apparently what I had made worked very well and better than I thought. So then I had to try to figure out, what did I really do here? So it was in a way working backwards, like where I was like, wow, this thing really worked for this woman, and what have I really done? And so I worked backwards and figured out what I had done, and started to get even better and better at developing what I would call application. And so that's the corrections technique that's now been created, stems from that. So, that's kind of the initial evolution, and then into what occurred for me to do this and develop it.
Were you using the method on yourself at this time?
Yeah, so I was using the method with myself, and that's a big part of why I created it to begin with. So, initially I had talked with you about, hey, this is something I made for other people. But the reality is I was really making it for myself. I had a lot of issues, a lot of exacerbation of the core issues, and a high anxiety, super perfectionistic, very better than, very closed, and I was very needless in my relationships. So essentially I was performing in like this very perfect way. When I was in graduate school, essentially, that's when it really kind of crescendoed. So basically I had a full-time job in the field, and I wasn't even through graduate school yet. I was a counselor in a methadone clinic. I had a full-time internship at UCSF, AIDS Health Project, which I beat out probably 1,000 people to get that position. I also had a live-in relationship, or essentially live-in, and I slept like 2 or 3 hours a night, and I was like, what's the problem? I can do it all. And I was really pulling it off. So not only did I think I was perfect, but I actually looked that way, and I was able to do things other people couldn't do. But I was highly anxious, and what started to happen is I started to have panic attacks. And so then everything, like the chickens came home to roost, so to speak, everything kind of hit the fan, and I became non-functional. Essentially, I had a breakdown. It used to be called a nervous breakdown. In California, where this happened, it's called a spiritual crisis, which is, if it had happened on the East Coast, where I spent most of my childhood, I would probably have been on a bunch of pills. But in San Francisco, especially at that time period, it was like, you're just going through a spiritual crisis, which was the best thing I needed to hear. But essentially, I had to have a way to work with myself and what was happening. And I remember a supervisor I had at the methadone clinic, I came clean with him about what was happening because I quit going to work. I was like hiding in my bed and they were going to fire me. So I came clean with him about it. And he basically was kind of like, physician, heal thyself. And he was a really cool guy named Ray Vespi, and is a Taoist, really interesting person. And so that helped me a lot. And I actually started doing walking meditation. There was this little book by Thich Nhat Hanh, who just recently said that he was kind of sequestering himself for death, which I can't imagine that level of grace when it comes to it's going to be my time. But he is really famous, Buddhist monk, and he wrote all of these mindfulness books. And so one of them was called Pieces Every Step. And a therapist that I worked with at the methadone clinic, Sandy, she gave me, her name's Alessandra Cameron actually, she gave me the Pieces Every Step book. And I just started reading this little bitty tiny book, and I started doing little walking meditation. I lived at the corner of Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, and I would go and I would do little walks, and basically started doing mindfulness, Buddhist-style meditation. But I started having these really intense kind of spiritual experiences as a result. So I started to have all kinds of awakenings, I would say, about like what was possible and like what I was supposed to do in life, and just a lot of cool things showed up. And I started to kind of heal myself with just that little bit of walking meditation and kind of these Buddhist principles. But it wasn't really enough, not for me. And I really wanted to repair what was going on with me, and I didn't really know what to do about it. So starting to like work with, that was when I first started to read about things by Pia Mellody and kind of this core issue stuff. Later is when I went and actually worked at a facility that utilized some of her stuff. But I'm doing all this stuff, I'm overwhelmed, I'm having all these panic symptoms, and I just started kind of building a little bit of what people now do in my work. So because I was so messed up, essentially, I needed to make something because it didn't exist. So it was a combination of what I needed, but also what I saw at that time patients needed. And it just all kind of started to come together. And then it really just kind of super coalesced in 2006, 2007. That's when it became very clear as to what it was. And I could actually have something to, sell essentially, and actually start doing the work.
What was kind of driving your anxiety, or what did you think led you to the breakdown versus what in reality was the breakdown?
What led me to have kind of a breakdown, which is really a lot of panic, were things that at the time, I didn't understand any of it. It didn't make any sense to me at all. Because I had kind of a classic panic presentation, if you will, like where what happened was I was waiting for the bus to go to my internship job. And all of a sudden I thought I was dying. So my pupils, I couldn't really see anymore, and I became incredibly panicked. And I literally thought that I was gonna die. What's interesting and kind of funny about this is where the bus stop was, there's a hospital right behind me. I didn't think to go to the hospital, but I thought that I was dying. And so I went home and I was like shaking and went to bed. So what was your question? Because I don't remember what I was saying.
What did you think was going on at the time?
Versus so I thought, what was really driving? I thought I was just crazy. I thought, oh, you're just nuts. Like, you are mentally ill, you're crazy, you can't handle things, and you're a big puss. That's what I thought. And that was my teen. That was my teen response. What I started to understand when I was trying to heal myself with what was going on is that there was this teen part of me that was being very mean to me and treating me very harshly. And so then I started to kind of notice that, and then I realized underneath that was this child part of me that was really damaged and really wounded. So how that really came together, though, is that I was, having my typical crying fits, essentially, And I was crying and crying and crying, and I was in my room. I lived in this big 4-bedroom flat with roommates. This is like more of a, and now it's kind of an older San Francisco story when you could like live there relatively, not cheaply, but even back then, I think I paid $700 a month for my room, and everybody else did as well. But I was having like these, you know, crying fits and stuff. And so one of the times I went into the bathroom and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I was a mess. I'm not a pretty crier. And I looked in the mirror and I was like, that's who you really are. That's what is really happening with you. Who you are is this mess that's crying in the bathroom, but not in like a mean way. It was like I saw myself for the first time. And I was like, whoa, this is who I really am versus what I pretended to be. And so I was like, you know, I've created this whole kind of persona that doesn't really, it's a part of me, but it's like a reaction. It's not really a persona. And that's when things really started to come together. Like I was like, oh, there's this child part of me, and there's this other part that's trying to maybe help me by being mean. And it just started to make a lot of sense, essentially.
And I guess what made you be able to listen to that knowingness that you were putting on a facade?
I have no idea why I was able to listen to that or why I knew the things that I knew. But I had already had a lifetime of not understanding why I knew things that I knew.
Yeah, let's get into some of that.
Just kind of knew what people were really thinking or what they were feeling, even if they didn't seem to know it themselves. So I, in a way, that wasn't so much of a surprise to me. To me, that was just normal. That I was like, oh, I'm understanding this, and this is what's happening with me. This kind of makes sense. Because I had always known things about people.
Do you have any examples from when that started?
Sure. I mean, like when I was a little kid, I mean, I would know when I was very focused on adults, and I was very parentified as a child. And so basically I would know when adults were lying, and even though there's no way for me to really know that. I would know what people were feeling, even if it didn't match what was on their face or how they were acting. And I would talk about it a little bit, you know, to closer adults to me, to, you know, parents or grandparents, things like that.
Did that ever get you in trouble?
Not as much in trouble as like maybe you just need to not talk to people about what you think is happening to them, essentially. That's a soft getting in trouble, but basically just kind of like it made people uncomfortable. And how could it not? Like I was a little kid, and I would speak to an adult in a way that was very adult and basically challenge adults on things, and you know, that's not exactly, doesn't go over very well, especially in the 80s in South Texas, where I'm originally from. That's not that's a very particular type of environment in this country, and in South Texas in particular. Kids are supposed to be seen and not heard in those environments. There's a lot of rules and rigidity.
Okay, so I wanted to get into your childhood and stuff, and that's sort of so we've talked about what you were experiencing when you were having the breakdown. Mm-hmm. What did you come to find out once you started working on yourself and kind of digging into your past? Like what?
That I was very wounded, you know, that I had been treated less than nurturing in a lot of ways. My stuff was more kind of neglect stuff. Like my parents were and are lovely people, but they were a little too young to have kids, and a little bit more focused on themselves. And I come from a long line of self-absorbed people, which is probably why I'm a little self-absorbed myself. So basically, what did you ask me again?
Kind of what led you to the breakdown in a real level once you...
Oh yeah, kind of noticing the, sorry. If you start talking about like childhood, it's interesting, you kind of get lost. I kind of get lost in it a little bit. You know, thinking about those things, you know. But essentially, and also I had like, you know, overt abuse. You know, I was sexually abused as a child. And so, you know, those wounds and that kind of wounding, that was really at the core of what was going on with me, you know. my body was not my own, those kinds of things. Those are things that, they're very damaging. It's very damaging to a child. And so basically I knew that that stuff was in there, but I just wasn't gonna deal with it. What I learned is that I was reacting to things like that, you know? And it doesn't have to be something as dramatic as like sexual abuse or things like that. Anytime you're treated less than nurturing as a child, you're being shamed. And you pick up that shame. And so I was just riddled with shame. You know, when I looked in the mirror and I was like crying, I was ashamed. And it was just all over the place, all over me and within me.
And what did you do to clean that up?
I started to develop what I do now. There was no way to clean it up. There was a lot of good information. And then it was like, well, go about your life. There you go. Thanks for the insight. And there were trauma resolution processes and different things that people did. And there was stuff that I thought was like pretty good, but I don't know. I just was like, you know what? I need to work with my child, this kid that experienced the negative things and the less than nurturing things that he had experienced. And I experienced a lot of other really great things too. I want to be clear. It's not about blaming parents or even perpetrators. You know, I've never been a victim of anything. That's a state of mind. That's a childlike response, actually. So I was very interested in fixing what had occurred. And there was no clear way that I could see to do that within this basic, you know, traditional psychological framework or therapeutic framework. There was also a lot of fringe stuff that I started to learn, you know, living in San Francisco and then being in California. And those processes I found interesting too. But I can be a little woo-woo about stuff, but I'm also very Western. And so I needed like a process. You know, I'm a systems type thinker, and I always have been, which is why I could write substance abuse programs and do programming and stuff. And so I needed a very concrete way to frame what had happened to me, to understand how I'd gotten there, to understand where I am now, and then how can I move forward? How can I be in the future as well? Because a good process has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's what I required. And I don't know beyond that why. You know, there were so many things that I just felt compelled to do. And then later in my life, or as that kind of unfolded and as things went on, I started to kind of be told what to do. Like it was like, you're supposed to do these things. You know, and I believe it was God. And I don't mean like I'm ordained by God or some like, you know, bullshit like that. Although I guess that can happen to people. I'm just saying that I was told what to do a lot of the time, and I would listen. And it wasn't me. It was like, you know, kind of a guidance that was like, look, this is something that you're supposed to do, and you have this ability to do it. Are you going to do it? Are you going to step up and do it? And that was hard for me to do. Really hard. Because who I am now is not who I was. Now, cameras, people, audience members, whatever, I'm totally fine with. It doesn't bother me at all. Back then, the idea of standing up in a real way and going against an entire field of thinking, I mean, I was not really equipped for that. And I got equipped for it, essentially. Grew into it. I've had the pleasure of growing into who I am and to my career. You know, that's sometimes that doesn't happen. Things are thrust upon them, other stuff. I've been able to grow into this, you know, and that's nice. It's a nice thing.
So, talking about growing into it, what was it like? You've talked a little bit about it, but like, what was life like for Brent before you started putting your life together versus what was the experience of life like then to compare to the experience of life like now?
Well, so much has happened. I mean, it's, you know, but it
I'm just talking like...
It was incredibly uncomfortable. And I didn't want to talk to people. I thought people were just stupid, basically. It was like, everyone's an idiot. Sometimes I can still think that, but that's my team. and it's under control now. But basically, I was not very interested in in other people. You know, it's very narcissistic, basically. So I didn't form very good social relationships. I would have friendships, but ultimately I think a lot of people were just afraid of me and how I would be. You know, I would cajole to get what I wanted. I was very focused on what I wanted, which I still can be, honestly. You know, but I was more Machiavellian and better than other people, and it wasn't a very good existence. I struggled a lot, but I acted like there was no struggle. You know,
In the neglect and sexual abuse was kind of driving this
well,
development?
some of that is what created the original wounding. That then, when I basically would cause that wounding would cause me to be triggered by things that were happening in my real life, kind of now. But it was those original wounds that was doing that. And I knew that was what was going on based on imagery, kind of like images I would have in my mind, and just how things were progressing, you know. And I ran our family when I was growing up. I was the center of the family. I had a career as a child in the entertainment business.
And you kind of made that happen, right?
Oh yeah, no, I made all that happen.
Self-defense from...
I mean, it was a way to get out of South Texas. I wanted to get the hell out of Bay City, Texas. And I wanted to get the hell out of there by the time I was 9 years old. So I made a plan.
Why did you want to get out of there so bad?
Because I was being ridiculed by other children. And basically, I was peer teased and called a little fag and a sissy and all kinds of things. And I didn't have a way to deal with that, really. I didn't feel comfortable talking to my parents about it. You know, I was this very kind of pretty little boy, and I was smart and I was sensitive. These wonderful things that you're not supposed to be in South Texas, especially in that era. And so I was just sick of it. And actually, I also felt like I had been just dropped into it. I always felt different, not just because of like anything around sexuality or anything around abuse or anything. I just was very different than lots of people, and I knew it. And so I felt like I was just dropped into this farming community, and I had to get the hell out of there. So I made a plan, and I manipulated my parents to enact that plan. And by the time I was 10 and a half, I had succeeded in that plan, and we were living in New York City. I wanted to move to New York. So it's a longer story, but essentially I created a whole series of situations, and I was a very powerful little kid. That false power, that was my team. I had a very strong team. And so he helped me out. He got me out of there, you know? But at what cost? And I think the cost was high.
So I think it's really important that we get into the child and teen framework, because that's the foundation. That's like to me, that's your...
It's the core of the work, yeah, is that matrix.
So if you'll,
so everything is built on that matrix. I'm sorry?
If you'll kind of repeat. So can you talk about the child and teen framework?
Sure, I can talk about the child and teen framework. I mean, I call that more the ego state matrix. But that framework, essentially, there's 4 core issues, and those are at the core of every person, and they're not fancy. It's what am I worth? How safe am I right now? The issue of perfection, which is about being a person. It's about being a human. And then the issue of needs. And so you got those 4 core issues in there, and basically everything in the environment gets filtered into those 4 buckets. And they're kind of up for grabs. Am I safe or am I not? Am I worthy or am I not? If so, how much? You know, am I perfect or am I just really a person? And what do I want and need in this moment? That's pretty much what everything in your life gets distilled down into. And actually, I shouldn't even say pretty much. I believe that's what everything gets distilled down into. And then, you know, the other part of that matrix is that there are also these things called ego states. And so essentially that's just a filter that you're filtering information from the environment through. And so there's a child filter, which is the wounded child that we've been talking about when I've been using my examples of my wounded child. There's a teen filter, which is how a teenager thinks an adult would act, essentially. Then there's an adult filter. It's not based on chronology. So just because you're over the age of 18 or 17 doesn't mean you're actually a functional adult, which is what that's called in the model. So if I have a child filter on, I'm going to be in like a child place. And so along those 4 core issues, what that looks like is, if I'm in a child place around my worth, then I think I'm worth less than you. I'm not as valuable. That was so much of the triggering I was having whenever I was struggling. But what I was experiencing in real life was actually the teen part around worth. So if I'm in a child place around worth, I'm less than. That was on the inside. But on the outside, my teen would show up around worth and tell me, no, you're not less than. You're better than everybody else. And I had all this, quote, proof, because my teen insisted that I be perfect. And so I could kind of prove that I was better than other people as well. Whereas the adult state is an equalness, which is the truth. The reality is that if you're on the planet, then you're supposed to be here, period. Therefore, all humans are equal. And I know that people are paid different amounts of money, people have different skill sets, people have different gifts, talents, etc. But at the core, everyone that's here is supposed to be here. So therefore, the reality is that we're actually all equal. We have equal worth. Maybe not equal skills, but equal worth. So if I'm in a child place around worth, I'm less than. If I'm in a teen place, I'm better than. And if I'm in an adult place, then I'm equal to you. And so that internal experience of being equal to someone is way different than thinking you're less than them or better than them. And it changes the whole dynamic of interacting and also with yourself, that dynamic.
Do you have any examples from your life of how that changed from when you were more teen versus now an adult? Just how an interaction might go, or?
Well, I mean, like, let's look at it this way. What we've been talking about is where I'm originally from. I had a lot of less than about being from South Texas. For some reason, I didn't think that was okay. And so I had a lot of less than about it. And I had a lot of less than about being lower middle class and then middle class. I don't know where that stuff came from. I just didn't think that it was okay. So I had a less than about that. One of my better than solutions was to move to New York, which was the center of the universe and kind of still is. And so basically I was like, oh, well, I can be better than if I'm from there. And as a result, my parents got divorced during that time, and actually my father moved here to Los Angeles, to Redondo Beach, where I currently work, and I live just down the road. So I was less than. My teen created a huge shift to become better than, and I did actually succeed in that. And then now I have an equal about where I'm from. So I am from nowhere. But I also am from New York and Los Angeles, and I live in LA now, right? But see, my worth is not attached to where I live anymore.
How would that
it
play
changes how I think and how I am. Like, that's not happening anymore, so I can be from anywhere.
So how would that play out in interaction with a person? Like, somebody says,
well, if they're from, if to teenage Brent, if they were not from New York or Los Angeles, like, I thought San Francisco was like a sleepy little fishing village by the sea. When I moved there, I was like, psh, this is like a little bullshit place. It's not even a real place. So basically, I'd treat you like dirt if you weren't from where I pretended to be from, essentially. I mean, I was from those places. I did grow up in all 3 of these places. But yeah, that's an example. I'd be better than you because I was from New York.
And now,
as if that really means anything.
And now you see someone, you hear that they're from
then that's where they're from. And that has nothing to do with what they're worth. Because see, it doesn't impact my worth. See what I'm saying? Like, I would get triggered by other people, and how I would treat myself is then how I would treat them. I was kind of teening myself, and then I would teen them.
Do you find that to be a common thing? I mean, you talk about how overachieving and successful you were are a lot of overachieving successful people driven by the teen?
Yes. So I'm laughing because that's why they even achieve success. So now I work with very highly successful people throughout the world. And essentially, they all have a lot of child stuff going on at the root that their teen has kind of compensated for those child things, those child triggers, the less than and the exposed and the defective and the needy. And so the teen will show up and be like, nope, be better than, be closed, be perfect, and be needless. And so that fits very well in a money-making environment. And in fact, it seems to be somewhat of the cornerstone of the corporate environment as well. So yeah, I mean, this need to become super, super, super rich or super, super, super successful does not come from a place of health. It doesn't mean that you're not supposed to do those things or that you can't express yourself that way. But the reality is most people are doing that from like a compensatory place. They're compensating for things that are not right. If I am this rich, if I live in this house, then I'll be okay. And then what happens is that it gets worse. Because money is just an amplifier. That's all it really does. It also makes you comfortable. It also creates security. There are good things about it, but it just amplifies everything. And so what's working really well works even better. What's working poorly works even worse. So it makes people worse a lot of the time because it doesn't actually do anything about the way that they're triggered. It just kind of exacerbates the problem. So they're like, this was supposed to make me happy, right? But it doesn't. And then it's really a letdown. That's a lot of the people that I see, frankly.
I know we frame it, child, teen, but can it also relate to being like external focused versus internal? Like if people think I'm good, then I'm good?
That's very much a teen thing, for sure. Like, in other words, being so focused on what other people think of me. Now, essentially, that resides with the child. That would be exposure around the issue of safety, what people think, and being consumed with that. But the teen picks that up and then uses that it's like, you should be perfect so they don't find out the truth. Or you should close up over here so they don't realize what's going on. He or she, that teen, is trying to help you. It's another child. It's a slightly older child in a state. And so basically, they just move to the opposite.
And what have you been able to do for some of these highly successful teens in terms of, through working with you, how have some of them changed?
There's dramatic changes. I mean, businesses they built, they no longer feel to serve them. Maybe it causes them to actually become more serious about business. But a lot of the changes occur in their personal lives. Because typically that's what suffers whenever a teen is running a big career. And you can't do it all the time. That's true. You have to pick and choose. But essentially, whatever they're doing, either they do it better because they're doing it more from an adult place. But a lot of them have big changes because they're like, hey, I built this whole universe, or even like an empire. And the reality is it was all built from a place of I just wasn't enough. So then all of a sudden, if you feel like you're enough, then it totally changes your viewpoint about what you've built or what's even there now in front of you, or what's really important versus what's important to a teenager, that's what's happening when your teen's running everything. And so they have dramatic changes. And the reality is I'm always just trying to get them to slow down. I'm like, don't blow up your life. Let's see how we can make this work in a way that you don't throw the whole baby out with the bathwater. So the changes are dramatic. Because your whole view changes, your whole lens changes. And actually, I think it's more of a true lens. Like the truth becomes revealed, And a lot of people describe this work and process as like a blindfold coming off, which can be scary. Because you're like, oh my God, I've built this whole thing, or I've led a whole life from these wounded places. But after that, people quickly recover from some of the fear of it and are like, I want to make changes. I want to do things differently. And that's what this work affords, is that you really make a change. It's transformative. And so therefore you transform your life outside of your inner life Your inner world changes, and then you view the outer world totally differently. So it requires change, but you want to make those changes. And what I do in private work is guide all of those changes, as well as facilitate the entire process. But then, wanting to bring that work to people that aren't able to pay the rates that I charge, frankly, is what led me to want to form workshops and, where more people could access this work. Because it really has been for rich people, to be blunt. I mean, that's what I made. That's what I've been doing all these years. And it's a powerful change, and it makes such a difference. And I feel like it should be pushed out, meaning being pushed out into the greater culture, that it could make a lot of change and a lot of differences for people, not just elite people. I'm not ashamed of only working with elite people, because they actually make a lot of changes, and everyone that looks up to them or they're employing or what have you, their friends, etc., makes a big change. And that does kind of, in a way, I hate to use the term, but kind of trickle down to everyone that they touch. Because when you make a change, everyone around you is required to change, to interact with you. You don't have to ask them to change or make them change. You make the shift, and everyone around you makes that shift. And so I want it to be out there. And it's time to do that. And I am being told to do it. And I do what I'm told, essentially.
Did it take you a while to do what you're told, to listen?
Hell yes, it took a long time. I didn't want to do it. I didn't even want to become a therapist. I did not want to become a clinician after undergraduate. And I was running from myself, is what I realize now. It's the only job I could get. I moved to San Francisco during the dot-com bust. And I moved there to get a job at a tech company like every other person at that age, at that time period. And essentially, I had all these internships lined up, and I drove from New York to San Francisco. And when I got to San Francisco, those jobs didn't exist. I mean, literally, I had jobs lined up, and I got there, and they're like, oh yeah, no, we're out of business. It was literally like a little movie, right? A lot of my life has been like a movie, actually. But so I was looking and looking and looking for different jobs, and I was determined not to get a job in the field. I was like, I don't want to deal with people's problems. And then I kept seeing this job posting for Larkin Street Youth Services as a drop-in counselor, which is a very glamorous job. You work in a drop-in shelter. And I did have a desire, even though I didn't want to do it, I had the desire to help kids, because I went through so much as a young person. And I was like, okay, well, at least if I was working with kids. But I tried every other thing I could do to get some other job. And this is the time of internet cafes. So I would go to an internet cafe for 4 hours and make cover letters and make resumes and all these things that I taught myself how to do. And then I would send them out. And I must have sent out, I am not kidding, 300 different jobs. And this was on Craigslist, okay, this is that era. And I kept being like, oh, this stupid Larkin Street job. And I was like, if I apply for that, I'm gonna get that, and then I'm gonna have to go work there. I just knew that was gonna happen. And finally, I had $150. And even then, in that ghetto hallway off the street, that apartment was a hallway off the street with 2 roommates, I was paying, I think it was literally $600 a month or something, which back then, that was a fortune to me. And so I had $150, and I was like, well, I guess we'll get this stupid job. And so I applied for the job, and of course I went in, and of course they loved me, and of course I was hired. And so then I was homeless kids would come in, and they would need to be fed, and we would try to get them to take showers, and we would check in their clothes, put on little gloves, and they would give us their clothes, and we'd put them in a locker, collect the needles and the various things, try not to get stuck by stuff. I mean, it's frontline social work, essentially. But what was interesting is that I actually really liked it. But I knew that I was supposed to do that job, and I just didn't want it. So But then I noticed that the case managers and the quote therapist, and even if they were like a junior therapist, not licensed yet, they made $42,000 a year. And I made $27,000 or $28,000. And so I was like, I need to go to graduate school so I can make more money. It wasn't this story of like, I was compelled to help everyone on earth. That is not what was occurring. I knew that I was supposed to do those things, but I didn't want it. But I wanted to make more money, damn it. And so basically I wanted an escape from real life. I was so young, and San Francisco was so intense, way less than New York, thank God. And I was like, well, if I go to graduate school, I can borrow a bunch of money in loans, and I can maybe afford to live here. And I don't have to work as much. I mean, it's not this, it's not maybe what you're supposed to say, I guess. But essentially, I went to graduate school and kind of progressed. And, we already talked about maybe what happened after that. So anyway.
And those people, the homeless kids and stuff you worked with, I guess what causes some people to break or be broken? I assume you worked with some people that were in really tough spots versus others to...
Well, but they weren't broken. They were doing the best that they could, is what I learned right away, especially because they're children. And they were youth, too, so went up to the age of 21. But what I saw is just a lot of damage and a lot of kind of organization of the self around that damage. It's survival mode. They were just in survival mode, that's all.
Is that...
It's a tough place to be, especially when you're like a kid living on the street. I mean, it was, to me it all seemed really normal. Just kind of how I was made was like, well, this makes sense and I can help with this and I can do it, and so I should do it. But talk about struggle, what they're going through. And most of them had severe trauma histories, which probably is not a surprise, but to really see it up close and to even start working with it a little bit, that was the first taste of things. And people were like, you're really good at this. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm just talking to them. And like all the supervisors are like, no, you have a natural talent to do this work. And I'm like, what work? Like, I don't even know what this is,
So people that I've run into, they can see that trauma history and they can understand, okay, these people need help. But then most people in daily life think they had a great childhood, yet they're still playing out
a lot of stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's protective, it's a protective thing. And also if most people grow up pretty enmeshed with their parents. So they don't want to throw their parents under the bus. And also we like to tell ourselves all kinds of things. And I want to be clear, this work is not about blaming your parents. It is impossible for your parents to give you everything that you need. They're just people. And then I believe how all this works is that we're designed and made and meant to give what we didn't get to ourselves. The reason that I think that we don't get everything that we need from our parents because we're not supposed to. And then you're supposed to figure out a way to kind of fill in the gaps and give it to yourself. I just didn't see that way available. And so I made a way.
Why? So the traditional, why aren't there other ways available? What's the roadblock in Western medicine that...
Well, it's symptom-focused. That's all. It's not a fancy answer. It's symptom-focused. All of Western medicine is symptom-focused. And the Western model, a medical model, is applied to the field of psychology and psychotherapy. There are a lot of other forms, all right, like theories and ways of working with people, but they're all still oriented towards treating symptoms. And I don't care if they say they're not, that's what they do. I studied so many of them and sought out so many placements. I always sought out the clinical placements that nobody else wanted because I wanted to learn what was really going on.
Do you have any examples from your past where you treated a symptom, and how did that go?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about a little bit before, where I would use traditional models. I was a cognitive behavioral therapist, and I would treat those symptoms of depression or anxiety, you know, or interrelational problems, panic, you know, bipolar. I mean, whatever diagnosis people had. So you're asking me?
So you would treat the symptom.
I would treat the symptom and they get a little better. I mean, the interventions would work a little bit, but it would not ameliorate the problem enough. And then also it would come back, or something else would show up. They would have some other symptom that they never had before. So I was like plugging holes.
So like what would they be? They would be doing, what would they be doing and then be doing something else? Would they they're having panic attacks, you get those under control?
And then they would switch to the other side of the coin, which is depression. Depression and anxiety is one type of mechanism. And one side of the coin is depression, the other side is anxiety. If you're working within kind of a diagnostic model like that. I don't really focus on diagnoses anymore. So essentially, something else would show up. You can name it: gambling addiction, eating disorders, all the things that people go to, quote, get treated. In other words, cured. It's billed as curative. Well, it isn't. I mean, I can't help it. You know, it isn't. Why else do you think people see someone for 25 years? You think that's working? Apparently not. You shouldn't have to see someone and rely on this other person in your life and build dependency with that clinician in order to, quote, be healthy. And the codependency, by the way, which is what I was, a raging codependent, the codependency is rampant in the field. Are you there for the client, or is the client there for you? It's a tricky game, right? And there are very good clinicians, by the way, very skilled at what they do, and they can make changes. But for me, it was not enough. And I'm telling you, I was pretty good at it. People liked what I was doing, but it wasn't enough. I wanted it to be a change that everything else would then change as a result. You just have to go deep enough. And that is the desire of some of the classic theorists, right? Like, whatever people think about Freud or Jung, you know, like, they were trying to go real deep. And basically, this is a very deep process, but it's got a seamless feel. There's a real clear understanding. There's like, this is the model. That ego states matrix is the foundation for everything else that you do. There's not a lot of pieces. You know, what people learn whenever they're going through the workshops, for example, you learn what I call the basics. What is this ego state matrix? What are these core issue things, and what are these frames of mind? You learn about boundaries, a separation between you and other people, which you need to be intimate, by the way. In other words, share yourself, your reality. You got to have a buffer there. So you learn about boundaries, how to protect and contain yourself, which is severely missing from everyone and is a major problem in our culture, right? You learn about feelings and what those are, what they really are, right? There's not a bunch of them. There's only 8 of them. You learn what they are and how to identify them. Those pieces is really all that's required to build a foundation to then do the application, to then do correction, and essentially correct what's holding you back. The things that you are not aware of are these things. They are ego states. They are core issues. They are a lack of boundaries, and they are an ability to identify your feelings. That's all. It's very, very simple. When those things are on board and they are applied in the way that I've built, people get free. They really do. They are able to step out of how they thought of things and step out of these chronic behaviors where they feel stuck. You know, I mean, I almost feel like correction is too fancy. It should just be called get unstuck or something like that. Because people are stuck, man. They're stuck.
I agree, and I wonder why there's so much there's such a lack of awareness around the fact that people are stuck.
That's interesting. I mean, I almost want to ask you questions about it, a lack of awareness around being stuck. I think that people are aware that they're stuck, but it's much easier just to look at your phone than it is to deal with anything else. Why do you think it's pushed so much? It's like keeps people occupied. Don't worry about the fact that you keep buying stuff and it doesn't make you happy. Don't worry about the fact that you hate your wife or your husband. Don't worry about whatever. Just go play stupid games on Facebook. It's terrible, frankly. You know, and I do use social media for my work. I do use Instagram, but I'm not personally on those platforms. Why the hell would I do that? It's a mess. And it just is a big triggering bed. It's a bunch of people, a bunch of kids and teens, people trapped in those states arguing with each other and data debating, not really sharing anything. I really think it's pretty damn toxic.
What do you think social media, I know you've been hesitant to use it, you don't use it personally.
I have not used it personally. Actually, when it first kind of came out, I was on Facebook for like a minute. And it was weird because this is actually right at the beginnings of it being a public thing. And so I was like, oh, there's people on here that I know. And I stayed up all night looking at people and like consuming all this little bits of information. And I was like, this is kind of weird. And then I was like, oh my God, these people are lying. I was like, that's not even where they live. That's not who this, what is this? And I was like, screw this. And so I basically just cut it off right then. That stupid account, though, you realize they don't delete anything. That stupid account is probably still active. I bet if I tried to log on to Facebook, it would show up. Because, you know, you still get tagged and all this stuff, and I did form some connections. But anyway, I don't use it because I'm not interested in engaging in a bunch of teen and child behavior. I'm interested in repairing that. And I'm not as focused on what other people think about me. I do think about what people think about me. Of course, I'm a person. I'm also an American who lives in West LA. But the thing is I don't think about it all the time. Why would I do that? It's more important what I think about me, actually. I don't look outside myself the ways that I used to be okay. There's no need, there's no reason to do that anymore. Not because I am successful, not because blah, 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 but because I don't have that stuff going on anymore because I've applied what I made, you know, to myself, which also is kind of weird. You know, like I guide other people through this and have built an entire business, you know, 2 businesses on it. But I just did it with myself.
What do you think do you think social media is doing something negative to our culture or
I think that it's a product of what's going on with people, but I think it does provide a particular exacerbation of some things. And it is look, it's not your friend, okay? It's a marketing platform, period. It is not a community. I don't buy it. And we even have a Facebook group for Lionheart. That's a little community that's on there. I freely admit that, right? But the thing is like, that's not the intention. The intention is to get your little eyeballs on there all the time, to advertise to you, right? And that's not the platform's fault. It's a business, but it's not your friend and it's not changing the world for the better. I do not buy it. It's to get you to buy stuff. And that's okay. I'm not saying that's terrible. What I'm saying is know what you're doing. Be aware that you're largely being used by corporations in order to get them to advertise to you to buy stuff. And the reality is those clients of mine that have worked for those companies at high levels don't let their children near it. What does that tell you? That it's toxic. It could be used in a way that's not toxic, but people are generally toxic. They're triggered in their child and teen. And so that's what they're doing on those platforms. I'm telling you, it's not just like, oh, it's Facebook's fault or whatever. It's how it's being used, what it does. And then also the kind of brain chemistry changes that occur, you know, like, it's pretty intense stuff.
Can your method help people to avoid social media?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I mean, I haven't got it all completed, but I've been working on like a social media type cure thing for people that are addicted to it. I mean, I work with it just more like another kind of addictive process. And so essentially, there is triggering that people have within that context around social media. And if you plot that out in this matrix and then apply correction to the boxes that are exacerbated to any child or teen stuff, people stop using it as much. And the way they use it changes. You know, what's weird is that having made this core kind of system, and I did not know this when I made it, you can apply it to any life area. You can apply it to your business, you can apply it to your body, you can apply it to sex, you can apply it to food, you can apply it to, you know, career, you can apply it to your relationships. I have yet to not be able to apply it to an area, which should not be the case, okay? But it's applicable to everything. It's weird, but it's because it really is at the core. And because it makes that change at the core, it naturally applies. So you can use it to target certain life areas to correct what's holding you back in those life areas.
Have some of your clients been able to quit social media since you've worked with them, and what's it done for their lives?
Well, some of them just don't want to be on it anymore because they're not as interested in what everybody thinks about them, and they interact in other ways. Maybe they actually talk to people, at least text them. I mean, how many people have 80,000 friends or whatever? Give me a break. You know, they're not actually friendships. What? It's absurd. And maybe they're not supposed to be. And that's okay. What I'm saying is that's fine. All that is okay. I'm not like judging at all. I'm just saying, hey, it doesn't seem to work too well for most people.
Where is the like screen time and instant gratification? What drives people's desire to fall into?
You already said it. Instant gratification drives people's desire to stay on it and to do a lot of things. But it's been well known for a long time that delayed gratification is a better way to go for life. Things should be built. They're not instant.
Are people avoiding, like you can stare at your phone and then you don't have to interact or live in the world?
People are avoiding other people, yeah. I mean, what's happening all the time every time you go anywhere? People are on their phones staring at that. Right across from other humans. Because it's scary to interact with real people. People just don't want to admit it. If you don't have any boundaries, you're all kinds of exposed. In other words, they could say something at any time that's going to make a big feeling in you, you're going to have a big reaction. That's if you are exposed. If you're able to protect and contain yourself, which is the adult version, right, the adult state, then you can interact with anybody and be okay. Because you get to decide if what that person is saying is real and true for you. If you don't have a boundary system, you don't have a way to do that. So people avoid people under the guise of communicating with other people instead of the people in their life. You know, Mother Teresa, actually, she was like, if you want to make a change in the world, love your family. The smartest thing ever. It's about the people around you, not about how many likes you have from all these strangers that you call friends. It's a pile of bullshit, Lynn, I'm telling you.
So what this kind of takes us into culturally, and what are, I don't know, what's the biggest, what's the biggest problem? Do you feel like our culture is different than it was when you were growing up, and what's changing?
It's hard to know if the culture is different. I mean, yes, there are differences. I think what's changing is that you know what everybody thinks about you all the time, and that's exacerbating things that were already there. It's not really your business what everybody's thinking all the time unless you decide to make it that way. So I think that's a major change. I think there's so much of a me focus, way more than even before. And there's always a me focus when you're talking about a human, okay? But it's very practiced and sanctioned now. Me, 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 me. And you can thank social media for that, because that's a part of how it's marketed and the strategy of it. You are very important. You are the focus. And I think that's really a problem. I think that it's not just that people are distracted by things now in a way that they shouldn't be, like always on the phone when they're driving, different things like that. But it's like, screw everybody else. This is what's most important to me right now. So I'm going to sit at this green light and email my friend. That's not just happening in LA. That's happening all over the world, especially in American cities. People's focus is on the wrong thing and in the wrong place.
What pieces of your work could tilt that focus towards
Well, what's causing that self-focus is a lot of triggering. And so if you eliminate the triggering or greatly reduce it, then there's a lot of other things to focus on. If you're always trying to make yourself feel not less than and trying to fill that up, then you're going to be focused on yourself.
You kind of touched on the victimhood thing.
Yes.
Does that seem more prevalent in today's society than you've seen it before?
Are you kidding? Of course. The victim thing is super prevalent. It's all about, I mean, that's at the core of what's happening politically right now in this country. You know, victim politics is what I think of it as.
Where do you think that comes from? Or what are they lacking from your method that opens?
Well, they're stuck. This idea that everything happens to me, I have no say in it, I'm being victimized. So basically they're very, very exposed. They don't have a way to create their own safety. And in a lot of ways, what I'm telling you is that it's not really people's fault. Look, the stuff that I have created, the way that it works is a little tricky in a way, but it's basic stuff. I feel like that this information used to be more well known and maybe was told more through storytelling and through campfires and through people actually interacting with each other, through parable, through other things, you know, like how to have boundaries with people, what's appropriate, what isn't, what's really valuable, what isn't, who you are and how that is valuable or not, you know, and it's just been lost. It just seems to have been lost. And the reality is I think actually we're very lost. Really, I think we're lost. And as a culture, there is a vacuum or something that's occurring. And so basically it just pits people against each other. My child is exacerbated by your teen. My teen doesn't like what your child is doing, you know, and people are just at each other's throats. If they just had some damn boundaries and manage their own feelings and largely mind their own business as they interact with other people, things will be a lot better. But if I need you to make me feel okay, then I'm going to try to make you make that happen. And that is the definition of codependency. The reality is that it's a codependent culture.
I've heard this from people I've talked to during and after your workshops, that one of the more profound things that hit them was the idea that other people don't make feelings in them and that they don't make feelings in other people.
That's right.
Can you kind of phrase that back and share?
I can, for sure. You'd be a god if you could make feelings in other people. And I mean, I would be the richest person on earth. I would literally just have a little chair outside with a little clipboard sign that said joy, and I would charge people for make joy all day long. You do not make feelings in another person. That is impossible, because your feelings come from your thoughts. They are not magic. They are not made by other people. People are a catalyst for what you think and therefore what you feel. They're just a player in it. You're responsible for what you think and what you feel. And when you have boundaries, you understand that. So if you say something to me and I am offended by that, I have literally made an offensive thought about what you're saying. And that's made a feeling where I'm angry, So I made all that happen, and all you did is you're just doing your thing. So therefore, I'm responsible for it. I can tell you what happens for me whenever you do that thing, but I do not have the right to tell you not to say it, not to think it, or not to feel that. That is up to you. That's your truth. I get to decide what to do with it if I have boundaries. What happens is that people do not have boundaries, and so they're like, you're making me upset. You better stop it. And in fact, I am morally better than you, is what we have going on now. I'm a better person than you because of what I think, and you are a piece of crap. And that's exactly what's happening on the left and exactly what's happening on the right. And it's all a bunch of bull. You do not get to hold everybody hostage for the feelings that you make based on your life and your thoughts. You need to mind your own business and clean up whatever's going on with you. If I am offended by someone, I go, what am I thinking? Oh, I'm thinking this really negative thing about myself usually. And what am I feeling? Oh, I'm making some pain, I'm making some anger, I'm making some fear. Wow, look at my response to what this person is doing. I don't have to agree with what that person is doing. I don't have to like their whatever ism that I believe they have. But I need to deal with myself. But we grow up in a culture, and it's in the lineage. This has been going on forever. This devolving into, you make feelings in me, and then I have to deal with it, so you better stop it. I mean, look it up. That literally is the definition of codependency. I'm going to use you to change what's happening with me. And that is sanctioned at an institutional level in this country. It's despicable. But it sure keeps everybody divided, and that's the best way to run a bunch of lemmings around.
So you almost look at life as if something happens that offends you, that's an opportunity for you to learn about yourself.
And to learn about, thank you, to learn about myself. And what this work does is it provides a roadmap to learn about yourself and also take care of the fact that you're uncomfortable with what's occurring.
And then that lays out a path of like interacting with life and potential to change yourself and grow as you move through the world.
You're saying it better than I would even say it. I think that's absolutely true. This growth potential that occurs because you make that change and it has like a ripple effect. Everybody has to change around you. And when you quit holding people responsible for what you feel and think, you can learn about them. And you can relate in a real way. Instead of only relating about the things you like about how they make you feel or how you don't like how they make you feel. Because the reality is they're not making you feel a damn thing. You are making the feeling. You are making the thought. I mean, can you tell that I'm angry? Like, it makes me angry. I'm like angry about all of this. And it's interesting because one of the gifts of anger is strength, energy, assertiveness. It's galvanizing me. You know, it's like I'm just so tired of it. And people are really, really hurting as a result. And nobody seems to care. And I guess it's because they just don't get it. I don't know. They want to fight. They want to get attention. You know, the media is a huge culprit in it as well. Pushing an agenda as opposed to what's actually occurring. I mean, listen, if you want to get me on this soapbox, I'm just getting started. Because it's so aggravating as a thinking person to witness all of this.
It worries me that we're going to end up at each other's throats.
End up? We are already at each other's throats. That's already happening. You know, class warfare is really starting in a big way. And as long as there's food, everyone will be okay. As long as they're distracted by their little phones and there's food that you can get, we're fine. But as soon as there's not food or there's not electricity, look out.
I guess, like, shoe on the other foot or other reality, had you mentioned suffering sexual abuse. What if you had...
I didn't say I suffered sexual abuse. I said I was sexually abused.
That's a very good point. Kind of hits to my question. What if you had, or was there any part of you that wanted to let that define you, or, and what would your life
I don't
look
know.
like had you?
Well, there's millions of examples of if it defines you, in other words, you can't move out of a victim place around it, of what happens. I won't pontificate on that. You can see many examples in life of people that that's occurred with. What's different about me and how I handled it, and I do not know why, this is very unusual, I'm the one that put a stop to the abuse, not some other adult or authority figure. That's very rare. So essentially there was this part of me that was like, nope, I'm not doing this. And what it was is it was progressing into more intense levels of abuse. And so I just stopped. I certainly didn't tell anybody about it because I'd picked up the shame from that perpetrator. But I stopped it, and that's unusual. So I don't know that I'm the best person to speak about what happens, because most kids don't have that kind of personality or that strong of a teen or that part of themselves. It's not normal to do.
I guess after the fact, as you begin to deal with it as an adult.
I had to, because of all the panic stuff. I mean, that was the main driver of why I was so fucked up, actually.
And that traumatic incident has made you who you are today.
Well, so have all the other incidents, whether they're traumatic or not.
Right.
In other words, I don't elevate those incidents. They're a part of my life. They don't define, because the shame has been removed. So therefore, they don't define me.
Or have any positives come out of it in the way that you view reality?
There have been many, many positives come from that pile of crap. So one of the things people that really know me well say is that I'm really good at making lemonade out of lemons. And I'm damn good at that. So it's had a lot of positive impact. This terrible thing, right? Oh, this terrible thing. And it has had a lot of really positive impact. Not throughout my life. I was made to go through all that stuff. It enabled me to do what I do now. It enabled me to build and make something that literally changed my life and literally changes lots of other people's lives. There have been a lot of people now that have gone through this work. So this may sound really weird, I'm grateful for those experiences. Really.
Have you found that your clients and people that you work with also end up in that place in regards to their trauma?
Ideally, they do. I mean, everyone progresses and moves into something else, But trauma is such a charged word too. When you talk about things like childhood sexual abuse, clearly that's big trauma with a capital T. But there's a lot of trauma involved in not being witnessed and approved of in any way as a child. Little t traumas is what those are called in psychology. But it's just as powerful. Anytime you are treated less than nurturing as a child, you are experiencing abuse. I mean it. We just don't have a lot of words. That abuse word is so charged, but we don't have a lot of words in English that kind of describe that in a different way. But anything less than nurturing is abuse.
So what would nurturing... Would that mean you can't spank your kid?
I knew you were going to go there. So basically, nurturing means that you witness the child and you approve of them. You don't have to approve of behaviors, right? That'd be a little crazy because you're not going to really be able to be a parent if you're just letting them run willy-nilly. Children have to be socialized. Literally, they have to be socialized in order to become functional within the society. So that requires shaping behavior. I didn't say beating it into them. So technically, there is a place for nurturing. You could do corporal punishment, which is what you're talking about, spanking, it's corporal punishment. You could do corporal punishment from a nurturing place, believe it or not. But usually by the time the parent calms down and they're not as angry, they don't want to spank the child as a form of punishment. Most people are spanking their kids out of anger, and that's inappropriate. You're using the child to get out your anger and your fear about what they're doing. So, I'm not saying that you shouldn't spank your child. I'm saying, hey, if you want to spank your kid, then it has to be from a nurturing place. So you still approve of the child. To go back a second, you still approve of the child, you just don't approve of what they're doing. That's the whole witness and approval thing. You see them, and it's witnessing and approving and helping them to guide their behavior. They have to learn, but it doesn't have to be done from a less than nurturing place.
So that kind of brings me into, I may be taking a little leap here, but how different patterns of behavior gets passed down through families, from parent to child, and then child. Patterns
of behavior are passed down through families through modeling. So basically, like the purest form of learning, and I do believe in this as well as that is the truth as far as efficacy in psychology and learning theory. The purest form of learning is modeling. So whatever's modeled by the parent, you don't have to be told to do, you learn it. So therefore, what happens to you is modeled. How your parents treat you is modeled to you. And then we just automatically do that to our kids. Or we move to an opposite sometimes. So I was never allowed to go out after 10 o'clock. You never have to come home, right? They're both, any extremes is unhealthy.
Child and teen.
And that is an example of child and teen, like bouncing from a child place to a teen place and back and forth. Those are polar states, so people tend to bounce between them along those 4 core issues. And that's when they start to have symptoms and problems. It's really that simple.
And have you found that these loops play out through family generation to generation? Or
they do inherently by the fact that it's modeled from generation to generation. So they're going to be played out over and over and over again. And it creates a cycle within a family. But instead of attacking the cycle, it's like, no, change the individual.
And this probably also applies to culture.
Right. I decided a long time ago that the best way to focus on kind of change is within each individual person. I decided that when I was trying to pick between becoming a social worker versus a psychotherapist. Because one focuses more on systems and changing institutions and larger groups and stuff like that, changing a system. Psychology focuses on the individual. So I believe, like I've been saying, if you make a change in yourself, it changes everyone around you. It's not magic. They're required to change because you're acting differently.
What do you think it is that human beings are put here to do, or meaning of life? What's
Are you asking what the meaning of life is? Sure, why not? I think I have an idea. So I believe that it's about growth, which makes sense, right? I'm probably going to say that I'm in the growth business or transformation business, but I really mean it. I think that this is a growth plane and that you are here to grow, and humans are designed to try to grow. I think that because humans and people tend to recapitulate what happened to them as a child or in the past into the present as a way to work it out. In other words, in order to grow. That happens naturally. I also know that one of the gifts of pain, the emotion of pain, which your feelings are just medicine, they're just clues, they're not bad. No such thing as bad feelings. There's darker ones. One of the darker ones is pain. One of the gifts is growth. And so basically, for those very simple reasons and just what I observe, I really believe this is a growth plane. And so I think we're here to grow. And what that means is quit focusing so much on other people. Focus on yourself. What are you thinking and feeling? What part of me is active right now? What am I doing or not doing? And grow from it. This process is an accelerated growth process. How it's done is very specific, but it's another way to think of it. It's a way to grow, but really grow.
And you grow to what point? Or
Well, I don't think that ever stops. It doesn't mean that you have to keep doing this work, but I mean, I'm saying like your growth is going to happen regardless, and you better get on board with it. Because, you know, pretty much if you're not growing, you're kind of dying. You know, there's trends of how things work on this plane. So things are going to change anyway. You know, one of the things that my less than nurturing upbringing really gave me was an ability to adapt. And that's one of the best gifts about my childhood, was I became highly adaptable. So growth affords that. The teen does not adapt. The teen is stuck. I am better than. I am closed. I am needless. I am perfect. That's all that he or she can do. The child is also. The nature of the child is less than. It is exposed. It is needy. It is defective.
So like Jordan Peterson and maybe Buddhism, maybe Christianity, they have an idea that life is suffering.
Wow, you just said Jordan Peterson, Christianity, and that's
Buddhism?
that's a lot. I'm just saying you're taking a person and putting them with like schools of religion. That's intense. It's interesting.
Well, I'm using he has interpreted those.
I see. Okay.
Those.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead. I just had to get on board with that first.
What do you think about the idea that life is suffering?
I think that there's a lot of pain in life because you're supposed to grow. I do not believe life is suffering. I think that it depends on how you look at it. If pain is not as big of a problem, if it's a part of just how things work, then whether one suffers or not is debatable. And what's going on with these basic tenets around life is suffering, and why that's framed that way in Buddhism is because then there's a way to not suffer. In my opinion, it's through emotional detachment is what I believe Buddhism teaches, which is why I no longer practice it.
So in your method, pain is an opportunity for growth, or in your...
Pain is growth. It is. And so you need to like allow it and help yourself with it, but it is what it is.
One of the things I wanted to get to was we've touched on planning, well, maybe not, boundaries and how much those can change your experience of life by having them versus not.
I think boundaries is actually the most important thing that I teach. And it's not considered that by most clients or people that come and hear me talk or whatever it is. Boundaries is a profound change. For what I've been describing earlier in this interview or in this dialogue, you know, it's the most important piece because you need it to be intimate with people. You need it to protect yourself from other people's realities. Your reality is what you think. It's what you feel. It's your body, and it's what you do with that body. That's your reality. And if you're going to share that with people, you have to have a separation between you and them to even have something to share. People don't know whether their thoughts are their own or their feelings are their own, or you make me do this or you make me do that. It's a crazy town.
So the whole like college safe space thing.
What do you mean?
The safe spaces have become a thing in college campuses where you get to go be isolated in an area and not have ideas that might offend you.
Well, and there have been safe spaces, quote unquote, since the 60s in college campuses, actually. But the thing is like, I think there is a place for, I don't really know what you're going to ask me yet, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you. I think there is a place for the fragility of someone that does not have good boundaries, and that they may need a place just to be with people exactly like them. The problem is that's considered a solution. And people don't talk about things anymore or discuss them. You know, one of the differences in my childhood versus now is, you know, I was in high school in the early 90s, and there was a lot of cultural integration going on where white people were checking out black culture was checking it more out white culture. You had like Chicano things going on. You had all different kinds of true kind of melting pot type experiences, especially in New York. And I also went to art school. I went to LaGuardia High School and was a drama major there, of course. But so basically now, if you talk about another culture, then you're appropriating. What? And no one seems to question this. Because if you say anything about it, you're a racist. It's all very convenient how you're not allowed to talk about anything. And the reality, because you might make some feelings in people, look out.
So is that a symptom of lack of boundaries?
Yeah, that's where I'm going. It's a symptom of boundarylessness, you know? Because see, we were talking about stuff. I distinctly remember being in classes in school where we would like discuss how we were racist. White kids, black kids, Mexican kids, Chinese kids, Indian kids. I don't care where you're from, what color your skin is. We were literally doing this and it was like really cool. Kids. We were kids and we were not freaking out with each other about it. It was like, yeah, we need to find out what we're racist about. Yeah, this is real. I do this. I think this. Wow, we're all doing this. Now it's two camps. And this moral elevation, this I'm better than you because I believe blank, blank, blank. That is not how it was going. That is not the direction of things.
What did that
and
do?
People my age are going to know this. They're going to hear this or watch this or listen to this and they're going to go, I remember that. Wait, what did happen? And things just got more and more polar.
What do you think was the driving force for making things more and more polar?
I'm not really sure. I mean, I think that things were moving in a really good direction. I think that there were, because see, remember we had the Rodney King stuff, and that kind of like spurred more dialogue and discussion around things. But then it became pretty quickly like, if you're not like me, you know, this whole idea of the other. So that's like the Lacanian other. It's like a postmodern theorist, Lacan. And he kind of came up with this idea of the other. And so things were less becoming the other, meaning I'm removed and different, and more, hey, we're kind of in this together. And this may sound weird, but I think also September 11th had a lot to do with it. That basically destroyed the American culture. And it's been teetering and everything ever since. Something about kind of the sovereignty of America being disrupted, being this huge landmass that had never had war except civil war on it, you know? So that seemed to really do a lot of damage.
Do you think one of the things I think about a lot is our lack of like a uniting narrative. And we had Christianity as a pretty good foundation that everybody...
Or other types of religions as well.
Yeah, we're kind of getting away from a religious, you need to be...
Well, and I think that's been happening a long time. And then the idea actually, to go along with your line of thinking, and the idea then is science is going to do it. But science doesn't have a soul. And so that didn't really work. That hasn't really worked for people. Science as the answer, the unifying foundation of things. I mean, I think it's possible what you're saying, you know, that like religion really provided that. But I often wonder, but I kind of right now I'm wondering, well, is unification ever really been something? I don't know. I'd have to think more about it, actually. Like, I'm not so sure that there has been unification. I do know that this is the most copacetic time period in history. This is the best humans have ever had it, period.
Yeah, at that same time,
you know,
psychiatric drugs are being prescribed at all-time highs.
I'm not saying people are happy, right? Not that they should focus on that anyway so much. I have been talking about pain a lot. You know, you're not supposed to be happy all the time. But psychoactive medication is advertised to people on television. So that's in the vernacular. And, you know, we're a pill culture. We all know this. There's lots of people that talk about that and have for many, many years. It's a quick fix culture. It's a big baby culture. It's like a little toddler screaming and throwing a fit. And by the way, we're not that old as a people anyway. If you really want to talk about the societal stuff, I mean, think about it. It started with, we're Puritans. That's the root. That's the foundation of American culture. Puritans, which were kind of wacko about stuff. So basically, you have this Puritan culture, and a lot of what we've seen, I think, over the last 330 years or whatever it is in opposition to that. But it's still at the core. It's why, it's talked about differently. Like there's more of a hyper-religious focus on it, like far right or these kinds of things. But really, that's a Puritan type framework. And so it's still very much alive in the culture.
So is it like a child, teen, that we're rebelling against those Puritan roots, possibly?
I think there is some moving to an opposite from those Puritan roots, more of a teen rebellion. But I mean, that's supposed to happen, though. That's not a problem. I'm not saying we should be Puritans. I think that's kind of absurd, frankly, in my opinion. We're meant to evolve, but there is this lack of unification. And there seems to be a real vested interest in creating derision. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but derision and division seems to be intentional. It gets you to read stuff, that's for sure, because it makes you mad. It's just amazing to me how Americans don't seem to understand that the foundation of everything is about advertising and being advertised to purchase goods, to drive a consumeristic culture. I'm not against consumerism at all. I'm a good little consumer, actually. But the thing is just, people don't seem to think enough about it. They're not like understanding that pretty much money is what it's all about, and that's what they're seeing. And that's what they're being led to focus on. So if I can make you mad with my headline or my byline or whatever the hell it is online, then you're going to look at it. So you're going to click. And if I can create an emotional response in you, I will always get you to click. And, and having said this, what's interesting is my work is actually applied to marketing as well. Creating emotional stuff within a consumer. You can apply it to that as well. That's about knowing your customer, these kinds of things, which also drives business. But understand that, it is very, very divided. And it's all because you're supposed to be buying stuff. And people actually believe what they're reading. They believe everything. It's the dumbest shit. It's just crazy.
And what could be a possible solution to?
Mind your own damn business. Learn that you're thinking and feeling things, and start learning that that's you. Work it out, and talk to the people in your life. That's all. It's that simple. I live in Palos Verdes. I work in Redondo Beach. Redondo is pretty small, right? I make a point to talk to people I see every day. Not because I'm being nice, because I really want to talk to them. I want to interact. That's what people should be doing. But you have to not be afraid of people, or afraid of how they're going to make you feel, or afraid that they're going to judge you like other people have, or treat you terribly. I'm not saying that everything's all good and okay. People are treated poorly because of the color of their skin, because of the amount of money they have, whether they're male or female, or whether they're somewhere in the middle. Whatever it is, that's real. But not everybody's going to do that. And no one gives each other the opportunity anymore to not be that way. People see me walking down the street and they just think, oh yeah, there's some white guy, probably rich old white guy walking down the street. And they think all these things. They don't know where I'm from, or who I am, or how I operate, or what I've been through or not been through, or blah, blah, blah. And they don't want to know, because they might have a feeling about it.
But yet if you walk through life with the filter that everyone was judging you all, like, in a negative way all the time, would that end up creating itself?
Well, I mean, you're interacting that way. It is a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Like if you think the world's out to get you,
then it's probably going to start being out to get you. In other words, you do tend to filter information based on whatever intention you have. That's true. It's called bias. You know, you prove bias. Humans do this.
Right. And one of the girls at our latest workshop mentioned after her sexual abuse, she hated men for a real long time and viewed men through a...
Well, that makes sense. If she was victimized by a male, then yeah, that makes sense. You know, that would be a natural reaction to have.
In therapy and different things kind of opened up and shifted that filter and your work.
And I remember talking with her about that, and that's why I'm saying there is a place for traditional therapy. It's a nice beginning. It's a good start.
Why do feelings matter so much? And do you feel like we're detached from our feelings right now as a culture?
Feelings matter so much because they're a big part of who you are. Your feelings are a lot of who you are. They're trying to tell you something. They're little clues. And they're evolutionary in nature. They're linked to survival. And they help you out. What was the second part of your question?
Are we detached from those feelings?
Yes, of course. You're taught not to pay attention to them. You're supposed to be happy all the time and ignore all the other ones. And if you go buy this, it'll make you happy. If you go do this, it'll make you happy. So yeah, people have practiced for many, many generations. And so most people don't know how they really feel about anything. They either feel good or bad or numb, or they're angry, or they're really hurting. People don't understand kind of the intensity changes of an emotion, but there's really only 8 core feelings.
People have described your work as really healing.
Good. I'm
What
glad
does
to hear that.
What does healing mean to you, and why is your work? What is it about your work that is healing versus other?
It's healing because in this work, what's built in is that you witness and approve yourself for the very things that you were not witnessed and approved of when it was your parents' job or your caregiver's job. So you heal these original wounds. And at its root, it's really a shame reduction technique as well. So you get out the toxic shame. I'm not talking about healthy shame. You need some shame. It's called humility and fallibility. It reminds you that you're not a god. Shame is not bad. The unhealthy version of it is whenever you're shamed by other people, whenever you're growing up. So I think that that's one of the things that makes it most healing. But the reality is that all of it's healing. Knowing boundaries, learning what they are, and utilizing them is in and of itself healing, and actually protects you in the future from becoming a victim of other people. You have a boundary there. You know, because of the witness and approval, it also focuses on worth and increasing self-worth. And so that is healing. It's also healing, again, to focus on the core issues, because then you become aware of what you want and need, and then you're actually able to go and make it known. You can ask for help with things that you want. Your needs are for you to meet on your own, by the way. But your wants you can go to with other people. And then it's very healing to not think of yourself as having to be perfect all the time. I mean, it's terrible. It sucked. I hated it. And a lot of people do it. The majority of my clients, that when they first start, they're more in a teen place. A lot of perfectionism. And it's healing because you don't think you're all defective and broken on the other side of that coin.
There's also a feeling component to the healing process, in that people seem trapped due to feelings that they haven't felt, and your method connects with those feelings.
Well, the trap of it is that you're still having those feelings, but you may not be aware of it. So that's what I refer to as an unexpressed feeling. And so you're having reactions and feelings to things, right? You're having some thoughts, but kind of missing the feeling because you've been taught not to feel it. And so basically that kind of builds up in you. And so a lot of what drives people, and one of the main things that exacerbates people and causes them to bounce into this child and teen state and then have these symptoms, are these unexpressed feelings. So if you can reclaim this ability to feel, reclaim and widen your affective range, your ability to feel, that is healing. And then you can get out the unexpressed ones that are in there, because they're gumming up the works. Those balls of gook are not good for you. And so that's just built into the method, is that we expel those.
And what have you noticed in some of your clients as far as widening that range and how it's like benefits that you wouldn't have expected for their overall health?
You will notice a widening of your affective and ability to feel, your affective range in the workshop. You don't have to do private work for that. I mean, just learning the basics and learning about feelings does widen that back up. That's healthy because you're not building up more unexpressed feelings.
Do you have any tangible examples of that changing a person's presentation or their actual health, what they're going through physically?
Well, understand that you are one thing, so your mind, your emotions, your body, and your spirit. So if you make a change in the mental and emotional space, which is what this really operates within, mental, emotional, and spiritual space, then it will impact your body. Your feelings are made in your body. These blocks are in the body. And so if they are expelled, then people's bodies, literal physical bodies, tend to work better. You are not split up into different pieces. The American Medical Association has strategically decided and convinced people that they are separate, that you have a body and a physical problem, and so that's why you need a medical doctor. If you have an emotional, mental problem, you need to go to a shrink, and if you have a spiritual problem, you go to your clergy or your pastor or whatever. You're all one thing. So when something changes in any one of those areas, it impacts the other three. So, I mean, yes, there are people that have physical changes. Beyond even sometimes just even looking different or sounding different, which is really weird, but that happens quite a bit. But people have an amelioration of some symptoms that are physical, especially any type of syndrome. Because, see, it's called a syndrome in Western medicine because that means we don't really know what it is. It's just a cluster of stuff, cluster of symptoms that then make up a syndrome. So anything syndrome-y, which there are a lot of syndromes, and then also anything that is, an autoimmune disorder. Those are emotional in nature. There's an emotional blockage, mental emotional blocks, that have pushed into the physical. And that's why there can be no definitive source to find it with Western medicine. And so basically, like, if you make a change, you're going to have a physical change as well. Whether that's blood pressure reduction, whether it's heartbeat, heart rate, because you're not having a bunch of the fear responses and other things that occur. But I'm not telling you that this is an answer for physical problems. Please understand. And I'm not a medical doctor either. But I do see a lot of changes in the physical plane whenever people work on mental, emotional, spiritual stuff. And vice versa. Like, think of it this way. You're upset by something and maybe you get a stomach ache. Right? So see, things impact the physical. And it's really the last stage of things. If you can intervene in a mental, emotional way, things won't often break out into the physical. Once it's entered the physical plane, the jig is up.
Have you, speaking about SSRIs or anti-anxiety medication, have people seen you and then been able to get off of those drugs?
There are clients that no longer use psychoactive forms of medication, whether it's antidepressants, SSRIs, atypical antipsychotics, whatever it is. Those drugs really work, but they're really powerful, and the side effects are very intense, although we don't really know what all of them are yet. But there is less efficacy, where people that are on them a long time, they don't work as well anymore. That's just beginning. It's not being talked about a lot, but it is happening. So I think there are situations and times whenever people might need some medicine, actually. I'm not anti it, but I don't know that it should be the first line of defense, the first thing that you do.
You don't believe people were born with a deficiency of Abilify?
No.
That's going to...
I don't think you're born with the deficiency of an atypical antipsychotic that you probably have no business taking unless you're psychotic. That's what they're developed for. So now you can just go pick it up at your Walgreens.
So for me, this process has been it's really been a kind of a faith building exercise, in that I have a lot more faith in life that I'm supposed to be experiencing what I'm experiencing, and
That's wonderful.
this is how things go.
That's
I don't
really
know.
exciting to hear that.
Um,
I have faith in things too. I think for me, I think of it more as trust. Is that what you're talking about?
yeah,
too?
I wanted you to talk about faith a little bit, that
Faith.
life is as it's supposed to be, and
Well, how could it be any other way? In other words, when you're not as triggered by everything, it is the way that it is. I'm not saying you can't make changes, you can't shape your life, but you're not fully in control of it. That's absurd. It doesn't work that way here. It's not how life works. But you get to shape it along the way. But I have faith that it is because it is. There's nothing that one of the things that occurs for people when doing this work is that you stop fighting against how things are. And you learn how to deal with yourself and therefore work within it. And then you can really do great things. Then you can focus more on expressing who you are instead of fighting with everybody about who you're not or what you're supposed to be or how things are supposed to go. It is what it is. I don't mean like accept and therefore then you just you give up. Acceptance and giving up are not the same thing. You accept and work within it. You don't get to choose how you come into this plane. You're just born. I'm not going to get into all this stuff about it. Well, you pick your next lifetime and okay, fine. That's fine if people believe that, But I'm just saying you don't get to choose. So you're born to who you're born to. You're born where you're born, whatever zip code you're born into, which is the new thing now. Let's focus on that. Make people mad about that too. It's and so then what you do with it is what it is. I was born with a lot of options. I was white and male and smart and attractive. Well, there's a lot that you can do with that. I didn't pick that. That's what happened. But I'm determined to do the most of it that I can. And I want other people to do the most with whatever it is that they have. But instead, people want to complain, and they want to say, it's your fault that I'm the way that I am, or blah, 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 blah. Well, I don't really notice that doing a lot of good. I don't really see that perspective is actually making any bit of a change. It's just spinning your wheels. And honestly, I think that it's to keep some people in power. If you keep spinning your wheels, then they just keep doing the same damn thing and enriching themselves and their businesses and their families. People need to wake up and focus on themselves. Quit worrying about everybody else. It's not working. I mean, if it doesn't work, then don't keep doing it. That's called stupid. I can't wait to hear from people saying I called them stupid. But whatever. I mean, it's dumb.
And a lot of this, and I feel that this makes you angry, that's why you've chosen to expand your business and step out into...
Well, I mean, it's actually starting a new business. I'm not even really expanding the other business. That's fine and dandy.
Spread your message.
It's to get the word out and create change in every single person that comes. And then they will tell someone else, and they will tell someone else, and they will tell someone else. It's to create change in the culture. It's an attempt to do that by changing the individual.
And where do you see in your message in the future? Where do you see this thing going?
Honestly, I'm not in charge of where it goes fully. I'm not in charge of a lot of it. I told you already I do what I'm told. So basically, if I feel led or told directly to do certain things, then it will arrive at a certain place. But I don't get to pick the destination. But I do get to shape the journey, if you will, which sounds a little cheesy, but I do get to shape that. What I do know is that I'm actually already pretty satisfied with the level of change that has occurred within the smaller circles that I operate within. It's a really satisfying feeling, actually. It's something I get from it. But I see the potential for it to change a lot of individual lives and then therefore build into a cultural change, a shift. Because we need a shift. And if it ends up not being my work, fine. But I feel compelled to do it. And I really need to understand, I feel compelled to do it. I can't not do it. That's how all this work has always been. I told you before, I'd never even wanted to be a therapist. In fact, at one of the jobs I worked at the Tenderloin Outpatient Clinic in the Tenderloin in San Francisco, which I think they went back to the original name, Hyde Street Services, there was another therapist there named Dylan Berkey, who was a very good clinician, and she would call me the grudging therapist. Because I was really good at it in a way, like very naturally talented at those interventions, but I didn't really want to do it. And my supervisor at that job was like, maybe you should go sell real estate. You'd be really good at that. Had I done that, I'd already be retired. Because that was before San Francisco became super crazy price-wise. But anyway,
So people from the workshops, they've described you as a wizard, and they've said that you have they said that you have a way of seeing into people.
That is true.
So how much of what you do is method-based versus natural gifts, and can you talk about...
The natural gifts and intuition have been built into a method. That's the clearest way that I can talk about it. So my ability to do things is not necessarily required for other people to do this work. But yes, I do have an innate set of gifts to see into people. And I utilize that gift to do what I'm doing. But the framework is the work itself. So it's kind of built in. So it's not a hindrance or anything, but it's a mix. I mean, this work is something that I made. It's an extension of me, in a way. And so some of that's kind of built in there. But yeah, it is. I am highly intuitive, and that's just the way that it goes.
Do you enjoy that you're intuitive, or do you ever just wish you got a break from...
I enjoy it, and I'm used to it. It's always been this way. I think I had to learn how to address that within social ways, like in social ways. I didn't really learn how to, wasn't really socialized properly. I always hung out with adults as a kid because that's what happens to parentified children. Like even other adults that were friends of my parents would be like, oh yeah, that's Brent, like 9 going on 40. That was like the joke because I was like a little mini adult. So I didn't really actually develop normally socially as a result. And so I had to learn that stuff as an adult. Really, I learned it in my 20s. Really, I mean, it took a long time for me to kind of understand what people my age were talking about and kind of what I was supposed to be interested in. Okay. So whenever somebody shows up to the workshop, typically the reason why they're coming to do it is not always the reason that they end up for being there. So essentially, like maybe they want to work on things, like they're like, oh, I feel kind of stuck in certain ways. So I'm stuck around my business, I feel stuck around maybe a relationship, or maybe exercise or whatever it is. And so what brings them in the door is usually what their kind of presenting problem is or their symptom. Once they kind of, and people are a little afraid whenever they come, actually. They seem a little, they're nervous. It's like they don't really know what's going on. They've paid some money, they maybe have flown from somewhere. We've had people from all over the world come to our workshops. And so people show up and they're a little intimidated, I think, at first. Even though they've seen videos or whatever, they've talked to people or their friends have said they should go. So then they come in and they're a little nervous about it. And often we ask them, like, why are they there? What is it they're looking for, essentially? And so gather some of that information, and I kind of am deciding if maybe kind of letting them know if they can get some of that here or not. And it's helpful to kind of guide the workshop Because there's basic things that we cover. There's like definitely an order and a curriculum, but each group is unique. And because the people that are there are comprised of different people that have different issues going on. So you get an idea of kind of what it is that they're looking for. And then we move into the material. So once they are exposed to the matrix, a lot of people start to think about, well, where do I fit into this matrix? And I actually ask people to plot out their baseline. What is your baseline in this matrix? How do you generally move through the world? Well, that creates a lot of thinking for people. And a lot of feelings come up as well. And so they start thinking about maybe things they weren't planning on thinking about or working on, or things that they didn't even know that maybe they needed help with. And then that kind of comes up, that comes to light, almost the real reason they're there. And then from there, we move into an understanding of boundaries, an understanding of feelings and what they are. We do an exercise on feelings, what I call an experiential, which is very powerful for most people. Helps to frame things. And it's a process. It's a process and it builds an intensity. So you learn about ego states and that causes a lot of change. Then we move into feelings. We learn what they actually are, what those core emotions are. We do some work on those. That expands that effective range. People start opening up even more. When we move into boundaries as well and learning about those. And we're having discussion and interaction and growing together as a group. And people start bringing us things and bringing me things. They start talking. And basically, if I can resolve it right then, I will, in the moment, resolve whatever's going on. Give them new insight, help them understand it, and then also show them how they can achieve a resolution by applying correction, this correction method or correction system, if you will. Those are the main components, and that's pretty much the process someone goes through whenever they're at the workshop. What I love is that people transform and change. They also come together as a group.
Can you talk about, have you been surprised by the power of the group or the...
Actually, I have not. Because I've been running groups a long time, long before Lionheart. And group work, even a traditional model, is very powerful. So I have not been surprised by it. That I expected, and if it wasn't there, I'd be not doing my job. I think the most common change or what to expect after is that people calm down. Like literally, things are not as dire. They're not as high-strung about everything. They're also not as child-oriented either. So they're basically less triggered. They think more clearly. They're not led as much by their emotional reactions to everything, and that happens right away. The other thing is expect to have some boundaries, which don't underestimate the change of that. It's profound. And it can create problems too, because then you're not acting in the way that everybody expects you to act. You're not doing what you've always done. You're not pleasing other people as much. Well, people don't often like that. So you have to kind of keep doing it and it kind of retrains the people around you. So it can create a little bit of exacerbation actually. But that's how change works. And then you have a way and you have all the tools you need to then implement those changes in ways that are a little less exacerbating. But I would say also the biggest thing is awareness. People have a profound shift in their thinking. They then have a framework. It provides a frame. So it's like, this is where I came from, this is what my life was. I have a way and a lens to understand that. That's huge for people, and that's super healing too. And it causes you to calm down. It's like, okay, I kind of understand this. And then it provides a way to work with yourself in the moment. Those are kind of the cluster of the biggest things, which they sound like a lot of big things, but it's a powerful process. And so you get a lot of stuff right away. So a lot of the results afterward, like how they play out, is people's relationships change a lot. So they stop holding other people responsible for what it is that they think and feel. That's a huge result. In other words, that's a tremendously different shift. And so therefore they have better relationships. A lot of people also make better business decisions. They make better decisions around money. They're not as triggered around that. Therefore, maybe they make more. That's not the intention, but it is a byproduct of this work. People do make more money. They tend to be more comfortable with themselves. Things that they wanted to accomplish, they have a way to accomplish them. Because you have to get yourself out of the way, so to speak, right? We all know that. Like, oh, you got to get yourself out of the way. That's the problem. But how do you do that? And there is a way to do it, and this is a way to do it.